Welcome to the social-engineer.org podcast number 125. And it is 2020. Actually saying those words, a little bit confusing. It's 2020. Wasn't I just announcing 2019? What happened to 2019? I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like 2019 just slapped me in the face multiple times, and here we are in 2020, ready for a really, really good year. We got a lot of exciting things to discuss in this podcast, so stay tuned all the way to the end. But I don't want to delay too much because I'm super excited about the guest. It's been, I think, from the early stages, like 10 years ago, when we had a polygraph examiner on the podcast. And now we have a federal polygraph examiner, worked with the FBI for a couple decades, and he's going to get on the show, William Ortiz. We're going to talk about how the polygraph works, some little tricks and tips about deception, and just a whole bunch more. Let's take a quick break and get William on the show. We are back on the show with our friend William Ortiz. Nice to have you on the show today, William.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's start off maybe with a little bit of background about you. Like, how did you become a polygraph examiner?
So I joined the FBI in 1997. I was first assigned to work violent crimes and major offenders. After 9/11, the attacks on 9/11, the Bureau shifted resources, and that's when I was assigned to work international terrorism. And working terrorism and violent crimes, it gave me the opportunity to interview and interrogate all kinds of people. And I found it always very interesting, amazing, and rewarding to convince someone to tell me something against self-interest, oftentimes meaning going to jail for many years. And I was like, man, if I could do this full time. And when I transferred to the Tampa division, they had an opening, polygraph examiner position opening. And bingo, I put in for it, got lucky, got it. And that's how I finished my 10 years in the FBI.
Wow. Okay, so let's back up to that part you said. So before you became a polygraph examiner, how was it that you were convincing people to tell you things that were most likely against their best interest?
So, well, obviously, as agents, we receive a lot of training having to do with interviews and interrogation, body language, different techniques. And I just worked cases that allow me to do that a lot. Some investigative programs do not permit for that, like maybe a terrorism agent. He will not interview as often as a violent crimes agent would interview. So I just had a lot of opportunity to interview people and interrogate, and the more you do it, the better you get. You come with your style of interviewing and interrogation and interrogating and learning from others and just experience. You just become better and better to the point where I believe some of my best confessions I obtained before I even became a polygraph examiner.
So how important were nonverbals to you and the techniques you were using?
So nonverbals are very important because I knew I was always conscious about not contaminating nonverbal communications. And when you are used to interviewing a certain age group and culture and people from, let's say, a certain religion, like let's say Christians, you already established without you even realizing like a baseline. I know what, like when I was assigned to the San Juan division in Puerto Rico, I knew what was normal and what was not normal when people talk to me in terms of nonverbals. So it becomes second nature. You talk to someone, and when you see someone that came across as odd, I see it as, I saw it like a red flag. And that's what directed my line of communication or questions.
And then when you got into being a polygraph examiner, were nonverbals as important with that job, or now it's because you have the machine, are they not as important?
They are as important. I see polygraph only as a tool to validate whether or not someone is lying to me. Just like I use nonverbals, like I use, behavior analysis questions. So yeah, polygraph is just one more tool. And to tell you the truth, just before I start the polygraph, I pretty much know whether or not someone is lying to me. Again, the polygraph it just validates my evaluation.
Huh. Can you explain that a little bit more? Like, how do you determine deception versus truth even before you get them involved in the machine?
So let's go back to my FBI days because now I'm a private examiner and I do not work the same type of cases. But an agent would come to me, would tell me, Agent Ortiz, I believe this guy's sending money to Al Qaeda, and this is the evidence that we have. Just don't have enough. And we interviewed him, and he's denying, but we think he's lying to us.
Hmm.
I would read the case, I would look at the evidence, and obviously learn as much as possible about the individual that I'm going to be interviewing. So I already have what makes sense to me and not doesn't make sense to me in terms of evidence and what the individual told already to the agents when he was first interviewed. So when he comes to me, the first thing I'm going to do is obviously establish rapport. I spend a very good hour to 2 hours just getting to know this person. As I'm doing that, I'm asking some behavior analysis questions that tell me where this guy is going. An honest person would answer certain questions, hypothetical questions, a certain way, and someone who is not honest, who's lying to me, will answer it a different way. Eventually, I'll get to the relevant issue, and I'll continue with the same evaluation. So just before I start my polygraph, I already have so many indicators, including nonverbals, because I look at everything globally. I don't look at one smoking gun. So I consider the nonverbals, what's being said, not said, what's being left out. And I pretty much, I know, okay, this guy is going to fail the test. Now, to tell you the truth, I've been fooled before. I've had people passing my test when I thought they were going to fail it. But generally speaking, I know before they take the test.
So you're looking for a baseline before you even get them hooked up to the machine to see what will change in that.
Exactly. I'm looking, obviously, the nonverbals again and what the person is saying and not saying. And if it doesn't make sense, it just doesn't make sense. And the more you do this, it's like as a parent, kids come to you and they tell you something happened in school. When you ask,
Yeah.
you've been around, you were a student too, you were a kid. Come on, son, daughter, that just doesn't make sense.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's a good analogy. So on the internet, you hear all these like different ways to fool the polygraph. Putting a thumbtack in your shoe, getting high, thinking about the wrong answer when you're telling the truth. Are any of those things actually accurate? Do they work?
I'm glad you asked that. No one can defeat the polygraph. People can defeat the examiner. There's a big difference. The polygraph is an instrument that is designed to record physiological responses, and that is it. An experienced polygraph examiner will know what normal physiology looks like. So if I see something that is not normal, then I ask myself, why? This is not normal. Why is the heart rate like that? Why is the breathing? Sweat glands are activating when they're not supposed to be activating. And obviously, I'll take a closer look at the actual examinee. As I'm asking questions, I'm looking. Obviously, we also have sensors, multiple sensors, foot sensors, seat sensors, arm sensors, and any movement. If you curl your toes, I'm going to know that you're doing that. If you're biting your tongue, I'm going to see it.
Mm.
And then at some point, you have to confront the individual. If the examiner is not trained to capture those things, will look at the chart and doesn't even know what normal physiology looks like, yeah, he can be defeated, but not the polygraph. That's the big difference. You cannot fool physiological responses. In a way, yes, you can cross your eyes, and that might cause the sweat glands to activate.
Mm.
But that activation, that response is very different than a normal sweat gland activity response. And a trained examiner should be able to catch that.
So the reason that it sounds like that maybe polygraphs aren't always court admissible is because of the human error, not because of machine error.
I agree with that. Me being a polygraph examiner will be the first one to say that we're not ready to have polygraph admitted in court. Although some jurisdictions are
Hmm.
allowing it, a lot more research is being done. Polygraph has improved. We have better techniques, better formats. But when we add the human factor to the process, that's when we become imperfect. So a polygraph examiner, I hate saying this, but a polygraph examiner can cause someone who is not lying to fail a test.
Hmm.
And if that's the case, then we have to be very careful before we even allow polygraph examinations, the results of polygraph examinations being admitted in court. Having said that, what I used to tell my agents when they came to me, and what I tell my clients now, you don't really need to worry about the results of the examination being admitted in court. The way I see it, the results of the examination are for the polygraph examiner to be convinced of this individual sitting in front of them, lying to them or not. Uh, what doesn't matter? Who cares if someone fails the test? What the agent wants, what the attorney wants, is the admission, the confession of the crime. And as long as that is lawfully obtained, that is evidence. So, I may not be able to tell in court subject A failed the test, but what I tell the jury is subject A confessed to robbing the bank, and that is evidence.
Yeah. So let's talk about deception because that really is sounds like what your expertise has to be in is determining nervousness versus deception or someone willingly trying to deceive you. So how do you find out if someone's trying to deceive you when you're interviewing them?
Okay, so you mentioned the word nervousness, and just for the record, the instrument will not record how nervous someone is. Being nervous will not affect the test. I see a lot of information on the internet, even by so-called scholars, saying that the polygraph instrument records how nervous a person is, and if you're nervous, that means you're lying. No, that's not true. But when I have an examinee in front of me, I do realize that the nervousness is part of it. No one, I had to take a polygraph examination every 5 years as an FBI agent.
Huh.
And even when I was an FBI a polygraph examiner, I was nervous. There's something about the instrument that drive people crazy. So as a polygraph examiner, what I do, one of the things that I do is let the examinee know that it is okay to be nervous. It is okay to be anxious. That's part of this rapport building. That's just before the test, which is the first phase of the examination, the pretest. I'm telling the individual it is okay to be nervous. Actually, I want to see them nervous. If you come to my office and you're
Huh.
not nervous, I see that as a red flag because no one likes to take a polygraph, even when they're not lying and they have no intention of hiding anything. So I tell them that. So then going back to your question, how do I know that they are not tricking my exam? Well, I know what normal physiology looks like. If I see a lot of activity, what we call the EDA, electrodermal activity channel, that is not normal, then that could be an indicator of behavioral or mental countermeasures. If I see the breathing is not normal, they could be blocking, they could be holding their breath. Obviously, that's not normal. And people can do that to affect physiology. And that information is
Hmm.
online. So a lot of people do research online, not because they want to defeat the test, but just like any other exam, when you take an exam, you want to prepare yourself, you want to do well. So they go online and they start reading a lot of misinformation. People who have written those posts, for the most part, have failed the test. So I don't know how biased or unbiased, those comments or posts can be or trustworthy. But as a trained examiner, experienced examiner, I get that people will read about the polygraph And that doesn't necessarily mean that they want to cheat the test. Before I start the test, I'll tell them, hey, I know what normal physiology looks like. Please don't try to affect your physiology in any way. And people will do that not because they want to cheat the test, but
Yeah.
because they don't trust themselves or they don't trust the polygraph. So they do mental yoga, they do all kinds of different things, not because they're trying to hide or lie to me, but because they want to calm themselves down. And I'll tell them that that's not good.
Yeah, I could see myself doing that, right? I could see if I was sitting in a room and all these things strapped to me and you're across the table and you're about to ask me all these questions, being scared that I may fail and that failure can lead to, a conviction of something that maybe I didn't do, and that creating an environment where I'm sweating more, I'm breathing more harsh, my heartbeat is faster, all these things that may make it appear like abnormal physiology.
Right. And again, that would be your baseline.
Uh-huh.
When you come to the chair, when I'm doing the pre-test, you're not actually attached to any of the components. Before I moved you to the polygraph chair and attach the component, I'll read the questions that I'm going to ask you to avoid any surprises, so you'll know exactly what is it that I'm going to ask you. I'll give you another chance to explain any of your answers if you want me to reword any of the questions. And if you are not lying about anything, you're going to be okay. Yes, you're going to be nervous. The moment I tell the examinee, okay, it's time to move to that other chair, the heart rate goes up again. They start to sweat. But those are things that I expect to see, whether you're lying or not. So I do a quick practice test where I ask them to lie to me during that test. I show to them, hey, this is working. When you lie to me, even though you are not hiding your lie, it's a directed lie. I can see how your body reacts. So, your body's working fine. If you're not lying to me, you're going to do, well today. So, and again, that comes with experience. If an examiner is not conscious of that, they might start a test right away without letting the examinee to, let's say, calm himself down, and that can cause a false result.
Yeah, I could see that happening. So really, then it's up to the examiner to determine, like, that's your baseline. This guy's just super nervous, and that means his heart rate's up. He's sweating more. So now I'm looking for changes in that baseline. You're not
Exactly.
necessarily looking for someone to just come in all calm and all that kind of
Exactly.
stuff.
Exactly.
Uh huh. I would assume that someone who is guilty is going to try some of these common tactics to try to fool the polygraph. Does that happen often?
Yes, it happens, especially with younger examinees. They are the ones who tend to go online and do research.
Hmm.
When I see abnormal or atypical physiology, the way I address it is I tell the examinee, hey, buddy, I'm seeing what you're doing. Please don't do it. I don't even tell them what it is. And they stop. They know, okay, he's not working, he's seeing it, and they stop. If they continue to do it, then I just stop the test because there's no sense in completing the test when I can't trust the results. And then so we'll talk about it. Why is it that you're trying to manipulate the test? And I might just go into the interrogation phase of the polygraph.
Oh, so if you determine that someone is just really trying, you change your whole methodology and how to use the machine.
So if someone is trying to defeat the test, I first warn them, hey, I'm seeing what you're doing. And they stop. Now, there are people who are horrible breathers. There are people who will move without knowing that they're moving when they talk. So yeah, there are different techniques that as an examiner I can use to help the examinee give clean charts. Can do a silent answer test. If let's say you tend to take deep breaths whenever you answer. Well, you know what? We're not going to be verbally. You're not going to be answering verbally. I want you to nod your head when answering. So that tends to help. And just like that, there are different techniques that we can use to try to clean the charts or the physiology, avoid distortions.
Yeah.
If they continue and convinced that it's deliberate, then I stop the test and then I go into interrogation mode, because if they're doing that, chances are it's because they're lying to me about the relevant issue. And by the way, not because you're using countermeasures means your physiological responses are going to diminish. I will still see that you're lying to me, which is, what I tell people is crazy. Yeah, you're hurting your chart, but you're not helping either way because you're still showing that you're lying to me. So I just stopped the test and then I start interrogating.
Let's take a quick break from the show to talk about what's going on in the world of SE. As you know, it is January. You know what that means. We will be announcing the DEF CON SECTF sign up really soon. You got to pay attention to the website, social-engineer.org, and the Twitter account, Human Hacker, because we will be announcing the signups for the SECTF, as well as some really new and exciting things happening at DEF CON. Pay attention to the website. All new SE Village this year. It's going to be completely phenomenal. Okay, so get ready for that. But now I want to talk about something even more exciting. It is literally a little bit over a month and 7 days. Will you be joining us in Orlando at the first official Human Hacking Conference? There are only a couple more weeks before we're closing ticket sales. You definitely want to get in there, especially if you've been enjoying this podcast. We're going to have people like Joe Navarro, Robin Dreeg, Dov Barron, R. Paul Wilson, Nick Furno, Stephanie Paul, Brittany Caldwell, Amanda Berlin. Yeah, my brain is exploding. Okay, Ian Rowland. The people that are coming to this event, none other. It's just going to be truly phenomenal. Head over to sevillage.org. That's sevillage.org and get signed up for that before we close the doors. Next, if you want to get in on the next APSE class, well, that's at Orlando, March 16 through 20. We're a little over half full for that class right now. So you want to definitely get into that class as the new year has started. And that class generally sells out. So get in there. March 16 through 20, you could check out social-engineer.com for that. MLSE completely sold out. So if you got your invite, sorry about that. And then check out our next APSE class in the beautiful city of Bristol in the UK, over there in the spring, June 1 through 5. And you can check that out on social-engineer.com too. Of course, please check out our side project, InnocentLivesFoundation.org, where wonderful people from this community have volunteered their time to work with me and law enforcement in uncovering child abusers and giving them the proper justice they deserve. So check that out, InnocentLivesFoundation.org. Okay, that's about it. Let's get back to our show and our wonderful guests as we continue talking about polygraphs, deception, and body language. So let's talk about like the common everyday person, right? Because like in this podcast, we try to, obviously you have a skill and a talent you've been taught, you've honed it over a decade. The average everyday person is not a professional polygraph examiner. So how can an everyday person use some of these baselining skills to enhance their communications? Do you think there's a way that can be done?
Do you mean to say that you're a businessman and you're trying to negotiate deals and you want to make sure that the individual you're talking to is honest? Is that what?
Yeah, that's a great scenario.
I think it's easier said than done, I think, because I've been doing it for so many years, but I apply the same principles when I'm conversing with my wife, with my kids, with my friends. When I go to the dealership, there's something about me, and I guess people really have that. It's just that they have to realize that they have that ability. When we talk, most of the communication that we're conveying, that we're transmitting, is nonverbal. So people should know what normal is. All you have to do is evaluate. If we evaluate and we see ourselves, how do we respond, when we're telling the truth and when we're not? What do we say? How do we, what facial expressions? How do we move our hands? So if you go to an auto dealership and you're asking a question and the nonverbals do not convey what the salesperson said to you, then that's a flag. You don't have to take it. If you think someone is lying to you, they probably are.
And that's an interesting thought. And as someone who also has been trained in nonverbal behavior, do you find that a lot of people today, maybe because of we're just so stuck in our phones, we're always looking down at a piece of technology, that we've lost some of that ability to really interact and understand what people are saying through their body language and facial expressions?
I don't know. I mean, if I'm having a conversation with an individual and this person is paying attention and he's taking part in the conversation, it's not daydreaming and looking at the phone like you're saying, they're actively engaged in the conversation. Again, at least a 65% of that communication is nonverbal. And the flags that I don't see, to me, they're flags. And again, it's because I've been doing this for many years. But
Right.
when someone is talking to you, if their answering is no, but they're not in their head, or vice versa, that's a flag.
Hmm.
So the thing is, how conscious are people of that? I'm not sure that, generally speaking, people are not conscious because I guess they don't have to be. I had to be because my job was to get people to confess to me. So that's why so many people get away with lying. Um,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, and we're trying to, like I'm thinking about this because, my job much different than yours. We're trying to prove vulnerability to see if like a security guard would let somebody in when they're not supposed to, or something to that effect. But how to use this outside of those realms, like how to, I mean, it must be really fun at your house. Your kids must hate the fact that
So they do, and their boyfriend. I have two daughters.
yeah. Oh my
There,
gosh.
yeah,
You have 2 daughters.
yeah,
They're poor boyfriends. Oh,
yeah,
that's just terrible. Yeah, so, like, that being in that job role, I can understand, how that's affected your life, but now the average everyday person who's not been through training, who doesn't have a decade of experience in being a polygraph examiner and maybe a decade of experience being an FBI agent, there still has to be some of these skills that they could pick up, that they could use on a daily basis to connect with other people, or to not get duped, like you said, like going into the dealership. We are all aware of the tricks that a car salesman may use to try to get us to part with our money and not give us a great deal. Are there little tricks or tips that the everyday person can focus on, even one or two, that would help them improve in that area?
yes. So I would say the number one tip is pay attention to the answer. Are they answering your question? To me,
Mm,
the number one flag I would say is that when you ask a question, that they answer something else with some unrelated to the question. Let me see if I can give you an example. Did you finish your homework? Right, and my daughter can say, well, I guess that's a bad example, but it's just not answering the question. I just can't think of one right now. But
no, I think that's a great example though, because I see this with the kids all the time, right? So you say, like with my daughter, because I have a daughter too, say,
mhm,
"Hey, did you finish your homework?" And she'll say something like, instead of just saying, "Yes, I did," it's, "Don't I always finish my homework?"
right,
Right?
that's a perfect example. Thank you for helping me.
Right?
So just like that, but
Because
yeah,
that happens to me all the time. So I'm actually hearing that conversation, "Don't I always finish my homework?" And it's like, and then I answer the question in my head for her.
right. And then if you're not paying attention, you leave it out. You forget. You
Yeah,
move on to something else. Guess what? You did not finish the homework.
right.
Yeah,
And I'm just assuming she did because she said, "Well, don't I always?"
right,
And I'm like, "Yeah, she normally does." So yeah, okay, I can move on from this conversation. But in fact, she's not telling me, that she did.
right. Another one is missing parts of the story. So going back
Mm,
to, honey, so how was your day? And your spouse or your best friend or boyfriend or girlfriend describe what happened in the morning, and then skips to evening.
hmm.
And inside it, you're like, so what happened during lunch? There's something happened during lunch that she or he didn't want me to know. That's just an example, another example. The thing is that, I can give you so many more. I just don't know how. If what doesn't make sense just doesn't make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, then expand. Keep asking until it makes sense to you. If it doesn't make sense to the point where you don't believe, then you have at some point to confront the individual.
I think that's a good tip because it would be wrong from what I'm hearing then to just assume, well, that doesn't make sense. Obviously, they're lying, right? Because that's not always the case. Because maybe, like in your example, maybe something was left out about their day because they're just sad about it, or there really was nothing exciting, or it's not necessarily that they, went out during lunch and committed adultery, and that's why they're not telling you.
Right.
You don't want to jump to those conclusions. It may just be that, nothing happened during lunch of event, and they just left that part out.
Right. And if you care so much about what that person did during lunch, hey, honey, so how was your lunch? Right?
Right.
Yes.
So don't just jump to the conclusion that a lack of a detail automatically means deception without asking more questions.
Right. But the same applies, everything else. Body language, there's no one smoking gun. There's nothing someone can say or do that will prove to me, okay, he's lying. No, maybe the person scratched the nose because he was actually itching. That doesn't mean that he's lying to you. Maybe the person is crossing arms because you're so close to them, they feel uncomfortable. So you're contaminating the environment. It could be a cultural thing. So
it could be cold.
Yeah, it could be cold.
Yeah, I love the fact that you brought that up because we talk about nonverbals and body language a lot in our industry, and our company particularly does training on it too. And when you always see people when they're new to it, when they're starting out, they take these hard and fast rules, like arm crossing, or that face twitch must mean contempt, and I love the fact that you brought that part out, that it's not always so blanket.
Right. There's not a Pinocchio response. Oops, that doesn't exist. And there's not a universal dictionary of body language. What crossing arm, to you might mean something different to someone else. Just like breaking eye contact.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah, I love that concept is out there now, because it is important that people realize that if they see something where they may feel, oh, I'm not sure, that doesn't seem like it's accurate, that ask more questions, talk more about it, have a conversation on that path before you just assume that you're seeing deception or some kind of negative response.
Yeah, I sometimes see those signs, those nonverbals, like sniffing dogs. Think of a canine. The dog is directing the handling officer to an area. All right, that's a sniffing dog. I didn't like the way he or she looked when she answered that. So I'm going to expand there. I'm going to search that area. What happened there? Is the body there? Is that where the lie is? But that doesn't necessarily mean that the dead body or the drugs are there. It's just that, that's the route the canine went.
Right. Yeah. I get it. That's cool. So, so you said you're now a private polygraph examiner. So what, if people want to know more about you or about things that you're doing, your research, where can they follow you or find out things about you?
So I have my website, that is www.ortsec, ortsec.com, ortsec.com. I'm also on Twitter, and that is @ortsec.
And I'm writing that down. That's good.
Same with Facebook and LinkedIn. Everything is @ortsec, ORTSEC.
Man, that makes it really easy. You got in early. I'm assuming you got in early, or that's just so unique, because the fact that you can have it all match. Yeah. Man, I just couldn't do that. Like, the time I got on these social media platforms, most of these names were taken, so I had to I had to mix and match. That's great. Yeah, one of the things we always ask, we have a lot of people who avid readers on the podcast. Is there a book that particularly helped you, or even if it's not about this topic, just something that you read recently that you think is good for the listeners of this podcast?
Yes, I'm a big fan of my good friend Joe Navarro. He has
Joe's awesome, isn't he?
Yes, he's. We worked together. He helped me as a baby agent many years ago in San Juan. It broke my heart, the results of his assessment, but yes. But
he's that good, I know. And the few times that we've got to be in person physically and chatting, he's scarily good. at what he does.
Yes, I don't know if you have the time, but I was working terrorism case in the 90s, and I was so convinced that I had infiltrated this terror group. My supervisor's asking, "Hey, no, you need to have this guy take a polygraph." Back then, I didn't trust much the polygraph, so the guy took the polygraph and he failed, and I'm like, "No, I don't trust polygraph." So I contacted Joe. He flew to Puerto Rico and did his magic. He tells me, "Willie, he's lying to you." So, yeah, good guy, Joe.
And then years later, you actually became a polygraph examiner.
Yes, and then I became one.
Yeah, how fortuitous is that?
I know. And now I'm trying to explain people how valuable polygraph is as an
Yeah.
investigative tool. So
That's almost like, full circle come around here, right?
So what everybody's saying is a great book.
That book is awesome.
Yeah, he's got several books, and obviously I read polygraph books. They're kind of technical, but anything having to do with nonverbal interview and interrogation, I try to grab and read.
Yeah, that book is probably one of the first that I read about body language that made it really easy to understand, because he writes what I feel like he writes for the common person.
Yes.
So you can read it even if you're not an FBI agent and go, "Oh, yeah, I've seen that in the mall, or I've seen that at the airport. Oh, I know what that means now." I always found that really awesome.
Yeah. Now, when I run into Joe, last time I saw him was at an airport. We're traveling for business, and it's so uncomfortable because he's reading me, and I'm like, "Oh, he knows if I'm lying or not." Now I know how it feels, like my daughter's 4 girls.
Yeah, so, well, I guess that's fair then, huh? It helps us be empathetic with our kids.
Yes.
Hey, William, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was a very fascinating topic, one we haven't talked about on the show for a really long time. I think the first time we even talked about polygraph with a polygraph examiner was, way back when we first started this, which is over 10 years ago. So this was fascinating to now have an update discussion about this. So really, thank you for helping us with that.
Oh, thank you so much, Chris, for having me.
Another wonderful, wonderful guest. William was awesome. He told me beforehand that was his first interview ever. He's a little nervous, but I thought he did great. What an awesome conversation. And I love when it's unscripted and you can have these validations of things we've been saying for years. So really, really great interview there. If you want to know more and follow us for future shows or have any ideas about future guests, send them in. Twitter, Human Hacker, or SOC Engineer Inc. for our corporate, or all things SE Village at SE Village. Social-engineer.org, social-engineer.com, sevillage.org for the conference, and InnocentLiesFoundation.org for all things to do with our nonprofit. Thank you so much for all your support. Enjoy this wonderful song from Clutch on the way out. How can you not rock out to the end of this? And we'll see you next month. See ya.